Hello, I am Bev Pommering, and in today's discussion on the real life, we have parents and adult children talking about their lives when they were actively using, getting sober, and life since then. The real life log is full of stories with people living relational, empathetic, authentic, and loving through substance use disorder and mental illnesses. The real life log is brought to you by the Live Real Foundation, a grassroots charity exposing the reality of drugs today and the dangers they bring. I am excited to bring you this candid conversation between loved ones that have chosen to live beyond their circumstances. We will hear from a mom who has 6 years of sobriety, adult children who are recovering from drug addictions, and their parents talking about how they now have a better understanding of people, substance use, and much more. You can go to golivereal.org to learn more about Live Real's efforts to bring awareness and education to our communities. Please like, follow, and share all of the social media sites to help us teach and reach as many people as possible. Welcome to episode 1.
Today's discussion will bring awareness and truth to substance addiction in terms of how relationships before, during, and then after sobriety. I would like to introduce our pairs of parents and children, which one of whom has an addiction. As I introduce you guys, please tell us who in the couple has the addiction, what your substance of choice was, and how far along in your journey of sobriety you are. To my right here, I have Michael and his father, Mike.
I'm the one that had the addiction. I'm about 2 years sober now. My drug of choice was heroin, but I didn't discriminate. I used all drugs, any that I could find.
Next to Mike, we have Nathan and his dad, Mark.
Hi, so I'm Nate. I am the addict out of the two of us. On the 30th, I will be a year and 4 months clean. My drugs of choice were primarily alcohol and cocaine, but also I didn't really discriminate either. If somebody offered me drugs, like whatever it was, I'm not gonna turn down free drugs.
All right, and then next we have Dylan and his mom, Erica.
Hi. So I'm Erica, and I am the one with the addiction. So my drug of choice was just alcohol. I drink every day for a long time. And actually, 6 years ago today is the day I took my last drink. So tomorrow I'll have 6 years sober.
Oh
so.
my gosh.
Yeah, we realized that after you asked me. I was like, ooh, yeah.
That is.
Yeah, so it's emotional because I remember like what I was doing that day, and I remember waking up. It all starts to, come back to you, and then like where you are now.
Yes.
So cool.
Yeah, that is awesome. I love the timing. That is, yeah, that's meant to be. And then virtually with us today, we have Deborah and her son, Adam. If you guys would introduce yourselves.
I'm Adam. I had the addiction. I didn't have a preference really. Anything that was available. And Punk passed in 2019, so I guess I'm 3 years sober.
I love it. Thanks for joining, guys. And then there's myself, and my son Alex can't be here with us today because fentanyl took his life 3 years ago before he could gain sobriety from drugs, mainly of which were opioids and alcohol. He was great friends with Adam, so I'm sure he would probably say the same as Adam just said. That's who we are. That's what we're going to talk about, is just how our relationships and addiction have collided and how they will continue to be simultaneous. We all will carry the results of the addiction with us for the rest of our lives, and we will all have relationships for the rest of our lives. And so I just want to talk about how we can normalize that, how we can break some stigmas and just bring education to the relational side of addiction. I'm going to start with just some education for those who are watching who may not realize that stopping the use of a substance when you have an addiction cannot be done merely by choosing just to stop. The brain is a powerful organ, and sometimes it is changed when we have a positive or negative experience. The mystery is still unknown of why in some brains it continues to change and others it stops. So let me explain by that. Is one example would be if someone's suffering from traumas or is in a negative environment and they, let's say, drink alcohol for the first time and they enjoy the effects. At that point, the brain's pathways begin to change. Pleasure sensors and chemical levels begin this delicate dance of too much of one and not enough of another. And that imbalance is what creates the addiction. The brain only communicates at that point the need for alcohol in order to eliminate the undesired feeling. Yet in some people, they can take that drink and the brain just makes the connection that drinking alcohol is pleasurable, but it stops there. It just creates the knowledge, and there isn't any further change in the chemical balance, because two people can be in the same environment and react completely different when exposed to the same drug or the same, way of dealing with the emotions. So once we can understand that the addiction is actually a rerouting of the brain signals, we can begin to understand how it's not as simple as just saying no to stop whatever activity it is that has taken over your life. So it doesn't matter what you're addicted to. It can be anything, whether it's alcohol, drugs, sex, food, gambling, whatever it may be. The brain reacts the same way. So unfortunately, as society, we tend to rank addictions. We also turn a blind eye to a functional alcoholic, one that is able to keep their job and seems to have it all together. But we shame the one that has lost their relationships and has not been able to be a productive member of society. They're both alcoholics, but yet we rank them as one being, it's okay, and the other not. So that is one of the purposes of this conversation, is just to be able to break some of those stigmas, create some more education on understanding that addiction is not just drugs and alcohol. Addiction is not just people who live on Skid Row. Addiction is not a male or a female, a rich or poor, or any other socioeconomic, division there may be. It's non-discriminatory. It can affect everyone, and I truly believe that everyone has an addictive slide of one sort of another. Mine is corn syrup, and it is not as quick to injure me or someone else that some of the other drugs maybe. So let's go ahead and get started on breaking some of these stigmas and false beliefs. So Erica, I'm going to start with you. Has your journey through addiction, now 6 years of sobriety, changed how you view addictions of any kind? And if yes, can you explain?
Yes. So I guess I always felt that I was damaged. Like, what was so wrong with me that I just couldn't get a grip? Like, how could my friends and other people leave half a glass of wine sitting there at dinner, and I was just like, oh my God, that is such a like, seriously, can I drink the rest of that? Like, what made the difference in that? Like, something was really wrong with me, and that I just didn't have enough willpower, or it was so frustrating. And I think that after I finally accepted that, just like someone doesn't choose to have cancer, like there wasn't anything wrong with me. It's just what happened because, like you talked about with the brain. And I just realized that we all have something. We all have a vice. Mine just affected my life, my kid's life. I didn't consider myself a valuable member of society anymore, but it can happen to anyone. I think that I became, through sobriety, I've become a lot more compassionate to people with addictions, because I 100% believe it's a sickness, like it's an illness, and but you have to take responsibility for that, because you're the only one that can change that. It's not your fault, but it's your fault if you don't get help to do something about it. So I think that I have a lot more compassion for people, and just realize that it can be anybody. It doesn't matter who you are, how much money you have, like, it doesn't matter. It can be anybody.
Yeah. Well, you kind of lead into my next point of, do you think people judged you for being an alcoholic? And if you could say something to them, what would you want them to learn?
That's hard. That one will make me cry. Yes, I definitely feel like people talked about me a lot. I'm not going to say that wasn't warranted. I did a lot of crazy shit. I'm not going to say that I guess that I blame anyone for judging me. But what I really needed was for someone to say, you need to get some help. Like, can I introduce you to ask me if I wanted help, maybe, instead of kind of like laughing about the crazy nights. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I get it's uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. But I guess, I'm careful now, like when someone is telling me a story, or that someone was drunk and they did this, to not be like, yeah, they need to get their act together. They need to do this, because it's not that easy. And I guess that's what, like, I would like people to know, is that there was something much more, much deeper going on inside of me, that I didn't need judgment or shame. I needed some help, and I think that's one of the hardest parts with getting sober, is you feel just your self-esteem is so low from being judged and shamed. And like I said, it's not that my actions didn't warrant to be talked about or whatever, but I'm trying to be very careful now, because I know that if someone's acting like that, like, there's something deeper going on inside and they need help. Yeah.
And hopefully we can educate more people to just take a piece of that and continue to help people that need it. I mean, it doesn't matter what kind of help it is. We're here to help people. So thank you for sharing. Dylan, it's often socially acceptable that teenagers experiment with drugs and alcohol. As someone who just graduated high school, right? I'm curious to know if you think your viewpoint of drug and alcohol use is different than others your age because of your mom's history?
I definitely would say it has like a contribution to it a little bit. It definitely makes me like think about it more of like the outcome of it, or because like obviously I'm at a young age, so like the brain can change a lot, and it's pretty easily if you know you're new to it and everything. But I wouldn't say it was like crazy different than the viewpoint from everyone else in high school, but obviously it creates that little space in the back of your head, like what if this leads to something.
And then I also believe that there's always some sort of assumption or preconceived notion, a stereotype or a stigma that we believe to be true. You know, each of us, if we see someone, we're like, oh, they're whatever. It's almost natural. I don't know why, but we're human. It's our human nature. Dylan, do you think you have had anyone make assumptions about you, or have you been told assumptions about you because of your mom's addiction?
No, I wouldn't, no. And if that was the case, I wouldn't even let that affect me, because like they don't really know what's going on personally in my lifestyle. So yeah, I've never had that situation though.
Awesome. He's the next generation here, so that gives me hope. Thanks, Dylan. Mark, I want to talk to you and ask if you can remember any assumptions that you made on Nathan of why he started using drugs or why he was continuing to use. And no shame or fault in anything. Like I just said, it is human nature for us to think we know why someone else is doing something when it's hurtful to us.
You know, when we talk about the addictions, I actually had addictions of my own. They weren't substance, they were pornography and, well, I guess food's a substance, but you know, it's just like corn syrup. But that probably which has probably resulted in, you know, a breakup of marriage. But I think partly because he would see the anger of his mother towards me and my addictions, and I think that may very well have affected him somewhat. You know, he could probably answer that maybe better than I can as such, but...
Was that the reason you thought Nathan turned to drugs and alcohol?
Yeah, I think that's probably played a large part of it, at least.
Do you have, or have you had a period of time where you were in denial about his addictions or downplayed the severity, especially coming from someone who has struggled with addictions, you know, justifying a behavior?
You know, I'm sure there were. You know, I remember even coming home from work after, as a paramedic and firefighter, having had patients who were addicts or who had been overdosed or something like that, thinking, oh, I'm so glad my children aren't like that at all. And you know, little did I know that, you know, I had one in my own home. And
it's a sobering realization when we think that it can't happen to us. And that is one of the biggest reasons I created the R.E.A.L Foundation, is to stop those stigmas of, and I guess just the plain ignorance of people thinking they're invincible. We've had over 25 overdose paramedic calls in Roscoe alone this year. So yeah, it's in Roscoe. And it will affect any town, any location, and that is quite apparent when the number of people who died from substance use last year was over 107,000 people in the United States alone. So it can happen to anyone. And it is a sobering thought when you realize, and humbling when you finally are exposed to the knowledge or accept the knowledge of, yeah, it's in my home. So thank you. How do you think that communication, between you with, the denial or not knowing how severe it was, how do you think that played on or affected your relationship?
The basic relationship, I think we've always had a pretty good relationship, although there are certain aspects of that were not open to it. It's and I knew that he would drink frequently, alcohol, and but I didn't know about other substance abuse so much until just somewhat recently.
Well, Nate, I can ask you, looking back, can you name some of the changes in your relationship with your dad, either during your active use, now after sobriety, that maybe you didn't expect, that kind of shocked you now that you look back on it?
Yeah, I like looking back on it, especially, I guess especially toward the end. I remember there were times where I'd call my dad and be like, hey, I need $20. So he'd drive over to my house and he'd hand me this 20 and he'd go, hope you're not using this for alcohol. And I'd reach out for it with a shaking hand, no, not at all,
Because we'll tell people what they want to hear in order to get what we want.
Right. There were times where I'd go over to his house and we would hang out, and I knew he didn't want me to drink that much. So I would get a couple tall boys, but while I was in the liquor store, I would also grab a few of those little shooters and stuff those in my pocket so he didn't know that I was drinking to the excess that I was.
Yeah. There's always ways to hide.
Oh,
right?
for sure. And I think that was even at that, I knew that he knew that it was pretty bad, but I don't think I wanted him to know maybe the full extent of it. I kind of wanted to try to save him from knowing how bad it actually was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can understand that, Do you think that other people's opinions have affected your sobriety?
How?
Opinions of you, or opinions of addiction, or assumptions of your family, or...
Do you think, while I was using, were people's opinions?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Oh, this is a fun one. So, when I was I think when I first started drinking pretty heavily, I was only 19. I had drank kind of socially, I think the first time I drank socially I was 16. And that,
it's a very typical age.
yeah. It was kind of interesting though, because you were talking about trauma unrelated to alcohol, and I don't want to get too far off track, and I think we'll come back to that. But I was, I feel kind of in the circles that I ran in, I never felt like there were any judgments, although there probably were. In my regular bar that I hung out in, if somebody had written, I just did cocaine on the bathroom wall, and I didn't know anything about it. But then a couple months later, I went in, to the same bathroom, and somebody had written Nate ? Below it. And it was I don't know, I feel there were a lot of places where it was kind of it was almost kind of a running joke. Even though everybody knew that I had a big problem, a lot of people just kind of treated it like a joke.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you say that. Nathan, because Erica touched on that as well, and how I think that's how people deal with difficult topics. They don't know what to do, so they just kind of make fun of it, make light of it, just to be able to kind of pass over it. Like, I don't know what to do here. You're funny when you're drunk, so I'm just going to make fun of it, type of thing.
And I was mostly pretty open about it too, like, especially in my regular circles or like hanging out at my regular bar, like I wasn't really concerned with like who knew what I was doing. I really didn't have like any kind of shame. Like I really think the only person that I tried to kind of like keep from it was my dad.
Yeah. Well, I know as a parent who is no stranger to watching your child's life be out of control, it is quite common to have moments where you go through all the shoulda, woulda, couldas, but we need to remember that we can only make decisions with the knowledge and wisdom that we have at that time. Hindsight comes after the decisions are made, and it would be great if we could know a result of a decision sometimes before we make that decision, but that's just not how life goes. And so let's just continue to learn from each other's journeys. I appreciate all of you. So, Mike, I will ask, as a parent of watching your son's life spiral downward, what would you say was the hardest part of watching that?
Well, I guess the hardest part for me was, once I knew what was going on, was just after trying so many things that just failed miserably to try to help him, was realizing that there was really nothing, like nothing I could do, and realizing, I guess, that I could get a call tomorrow that, and that there's just simply nothing I could do. That was the hardest part.
Yeah. I can definitely relate to that because you truly are helpless after a certain point. We can give advice, we can help lead, we can help provide, but until that person is ready to make a decision in their life, we can't make it for them. For Pete's sakes, don't you see how ridiculous this is and how dangerous this is and how you're spiraling downward? It's so frustrating as a parent to be so helpless. And I mean, really, for any relationship, anyone you care about, I guess, Michael, you may have had a couple feelings like that about Nate too when you first met him. So Mike, I don't know, I guess another question I'd ask of you, is there any communication, support, relationship advice you would give someone that is currently watching their child sink into addiction? Coming from having been on that side with,
Well, for me, I grew up with a dad who, he's been sober for like 42 years. And that was his job at General Motors, was to help people who had any addiction problems or marital problems. And he was always bringing people home, not even from work, and counseling them. So I really did have, I knew who to call and talk to. A lot of my dad's AA buddies. My dad had moved to Florida, so he wasn't around when we were going through this, and but I definitely did have that support system. I guess I'd say find out, about your local AA or NA
Al-Anon
organization,
yeah,
and reach out to those people, because they care. They care about what you're going through or what your child's going through, and will really, do anything that they can to give you the information or set up an intervention or
Just
I mean,
help
that
you
was-
realize
yeah,
you're
yeah.
not crazy.
Right,
And,
exactly.
you're not alone.
Yep.
And I think we've all kind of touched base on that, it doesn't discriminate,
No.
and you are not alone when you go through things like this. So, great. I would feel the same way. So I know Michael is active in helping others through their journey by sharing your journey. I'm a big believer in that sharing our stories is the best way to heal. Sometimes when we're sharing our story, you see a different perspective when you hear it come out of your mouth. Have you had an experience like that where a light bulb went off and you kind of learned something about yourself or about addiction when you heard it come out of your own mouth?
I guess I would just say I really learned that some people, they need others to have motivation for them before they can have it for themselves. Because when you're using and in that position, you lose any self-confidence and you don't feel good about yourself. So if everybody around you doesn't care about you, why are you going to care about yourself? So some people just need somebody to want it for them and to, be excited about it, and then they will catch on. Because at my lowest point, I didn't care if I was sober or not. I thought I was going to die a heroin addict, or I thought I was going to be like a 45, 50-year-old heroin addict, like an old man heroin addict. Like I didn't see getting sober was an option.
Yeah. And we spoke the other day, and you had mentioned to me that it's encouraging to hear the judge in your drug court say praises of how well you're doing, and yet at the same time you kind of felt weird in front of others who are going through that same program. Do you think others might feel the same way? And what is one thing you do to keep those encouraging thoughts above the discouraging thoughts?
Well, when I was speaking on it, I was thinking that I was just feeling kind of like a teacher's pet a lot of the time, because people go in and, the judge talks about what they're doing bad or like where they messed up. And then when I would go up, she wouldn't have too much bad things to say about me. And that did make me feel weird. But then I just, I look back at my time in drug court and see a lot of the people in the program, not a lot of people were doing the work that they needed to. And then when I got in the program, it felt like somebody started doing good in the program, and then everybody else got their momentum. And like people who had been in the program for 3 or 4 years, they all of a sudden started doing what they were supposed to. So it was like everybody was able to come together and,
feed off of that
yeah,
energy.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's what sharing our stories does. That's what hearing other people's struggles and accomplishments does. It motivates us to keep going. And so that's awesome. So Deborah and Adam, I'm going to move to you. I know you two the most out of everyone here, just because you guys knew my son Alex. Adam, I'm going to speak to you and say, God has given me the grace to love you as my own. You are not guilty of anything but making the same decision that Alex made that night, and that was to use drugs. Alex was killed by fentanyl. No one was aware of the deadly amount of fentanyl that was in the drug that you guys had purchased. Adam, can you speak on if you feel or how fentanyl has changed your view of drug use over the Hollywood version of drug use, of what people, the glamour of it?
Well, I know there's at least when you see addiction in movies and all that, nobody's dying from it. They're just ruining their lives. Nobody's getting fentanyl in their bags and just dying. So it was a little different to start learning about it happening in real life, that so many people were getting bags of fentanyl.
Yeah, and as we know, for Alex, you guys thought you were doing heroin that night, and there was no heroin in Alex's system when he died, and that really makes the user helpless. You did not make that choice to do fentanyl, and yeah, it's a sobering thought to see it in person. And I don't know, do you feel frustrated now that it's still portrayed in the public eye as somewhat acceptable, not as dangerous as it really is?
Not so much, because I know there's plenty of information out there that everybody should be looking at, but is not necessarily. But I know if you're looking to find the answers, you can find them.
What has been the hardest part of staying sober for you?
There's a lot of feelings that I go back on, like from that time period, and I think, man, sometimes I just want to revert back to the old ways. But I got these tattoos on my fingers of your son so that I don't do that.
Adam has R.I.P.P.O.M. on his hands, and Alex's nickname was Pom, short for our last name, and so everyone knew him as Pom. I want to ask you, has my relationship with you and your son changed your viewpoint on addiction?
Absolutely, because I've never witnessed the happenings as far as drug use goes. My father was an alcoholic. My stepfather was an alcoholic who got himself clean after we were kids for 40 some years. My ex-husband is an alcoholic who's getting himself clean for the second time over 25 years. So it was always alcohol with us, well, with our family. My brother did have an addiction, and that went into heroin that started out with pot. So I've seen what could happen, but to witness it firsthand, I've never seen Adam high before. And if I did, I had no clue he was, because I didn't educate myself as a parent to see what I thought I would recognize when my kid was high versus not high. And I still, to this day, I don't know if I could tell you one way or the other if someone was high versus not high in talking to me.
Sometimes you can't tell. Especially, I think I've had conversations with you, Nate, about, when you get to a certain point of an addiction, you need a certain amount to just be functional, to just make it to that level where it appears that you have it all together, And so a lot of times people don't see it. They don't know if you're drunk, or they don't know how bad it really is.
That's for sure. Yeah, by the end of it, when I was, when I, like before, I went on my last nosedive, I would keep a few single shooters of like 99 proof alcohol in my house, so that, because when I woke up, it didn't matter how much I had the night before, or how much was in my system. When I woke up, even if it was like 5 hours later, the first thing I did was start like puking from withdrawal, and like not even like just like shaky hands, but like I had like full body tremors. And I would have to do like 4 or 5 shots in the morning, just to be able to get out of the, like just to like stop puking and stop shaking all over. And like without that, I literally couldn't function.
And Deborah, I would agree with you that, it's hard to know, to see. And for me, I used drugs and alcohol when I was a teenager, but for whatever reason, my brain was one of those that it didn't create that crevice of addiction. Yeah, there's definitely times and periods where I overused, but I was able to just say no. I just could stop. So I thought, having children, I would be aware. I would know the signs of addiction. I would know what to look for. Mike, I'm sure you felt the same way growing up in the household that you had mentioned. You think you have this knowledge and you think you're able to pass that on to your children. And for whatever reason, you really don't have a choice. And I think it stems back to everyone's brain and body makeup reacts different to the same situation. And one thing that I've realized that now I teach on is the drugs today are not the drugs of the 80s. And like I talked with Adam, it is not safe for teenagers to just experiment with drugs and alcohol anymore. Fentanyl is in absolutely everything, and people are dying every single day from it. What frustrates you the most about other people's viewpoints and opinions of people with addictions, people like Adam, that have struggled with this?
I think the most frustrating part is that you can't find them in the situation that they're in until it's too late. As in Alex's case, because at that point when I realized that Adam was what I thought dabbling was a little bit more than that. I knew he drank, and I knew sometimes it was a lot, but he didn't live with us at the time. So a lot of what he did went unseen or unnoticed, because when I'd see him, he was my Adam. There was no inkling, and that's the most frustrating part on my end, because I missed things and I missed clues that I might have seen had our family dynamic had not changed throughout his teenage years. As far as the stigma, I don't think they really have a stigma, because a lot of people don't know that Adam was using drugs or was drinking alcohol to the excess that he was, because again, he was only around Christmas time, Thanksgiving. He'd come visit for a weekend, so they didn't actually see him, for a lack of a better term, in his prime. I didn't see it. His father didn't see it. So that's frustrating on my end, because I missed something, and maybe I could have protected him from everything he saw or went through if I had caught something.
Yeah, that's a hard frustration for everyone. Those shoulda, woulda, couldas that we all, battle as loved ones watching. Dylan, was there times in your childhood that you can remember those times where your mom was still actively drinking, where you thought, well, is there something that I could do to make this better?
Not necessarily me, because I was at a pretty young age, so nothing I could say would really affect her, other than my feelings, me getting upset about something that she's done or something like that would affect her. But I think that if my sister was to say something, or her ex-husband, my dad, then
Did you feel that, there was any, did you feel any shame or it was because of you and your sister or because of something you have said or done or?
No, I think I was able to, it just made me think about what possibly could be doing it. And so I would pay closer attention to every single thing that's going on and be like, is that the reason? And then I would just constantly go in my head and think about what it could be. And so I would just go in circles, but I never really thought it was me or my sister because I just, we didn't really have a negative impact on her, I feel like.
Awesome. That's good. That's good because, the truth of the matter is that nobody is guilty. Nobody is the cause. So I just want to thank each of you for being willing to be vulnerable and tell your stories of how addiction has affected your relationships and how it has changed some viewpoints you have in life. So just one final question for each of you. Is if there was one fact about addiction that you want people to know, what would that be? If there's one thing from today's discussion that you want people to understand, what would that be? Deborah and Adam, can I start with you?
I would say that it's not a choice to be an addict.
Yeah, it's not something you wake up and aspire to be.
Right.
Yeah. For me, I think it would be to look for the education that's out there. Don't just assume it's not going to happen to your family, and find information prior to, that way you're prepared for something when it does happen.
Yeah. Yep. Michael, what about you?
I would say that nobody wants to be addicted to anything. Nobody wants to be an addict. And even if somebody says they don't want help, I think they know that they need help. Yeah. It's just hard to admit that. And I'd also like to say, no matter where you're at, you can probably find AA or NA in your community. And if you want to go to NA and they don't have it, they only have AA, you can still go to those meetings. And you walk in and those people are so ready and willing to help you. And just don't be nervous. Just go to one meeting. If you don't like it and it's not for you, okay, but that probably won't happen. You'll probably end up going back.
Yeah. Yeah. Mike, how about you?
I would say for me, it would be, we're all kind of messed up, right?
Yeah.
We all have our trauma from childhood or whatever. And I think a lot of people that deal with addiction, they self-medicate. They're trying to figure out how to fill that hole or just feel normal, and they don't know how to do it, and they take this or that, and they, I guess, just do whatever they can to self-medicate. So don't be so judgmental when we're dealing with these people, because they might have just used a substance that was, worse than the substance or that I'm using. So just maybe not be so judgmental and try to help.
Yeah. Not ranking, acceptability of one disorder over another.
Right. We all have something.
Yes, we do. Yeah. Nathan, what would be the one thing you would want people to know from our conversation today?
So I was thinking about that too. I've referred to that as the hierarchy of drugs. Yeah. So I do cocaine, but I'd never smoke crack. I did that too. I was smoking crack anyway. I think for me too, it actually, a lot of what you said kind of led me into what I'd say. I really believe that my addiction did start as a result of a lot of childhood trauma that I dealt with. I know that my dad had kind of mentioned my mom's anger towards him, but that wasn't isolated just to him. Like me, my brother, and my sister were all really victims of her abuse, as well as my dad was. And I mean, and she was explosive. There were times that I was scared for my life, and I associate with the first time I tried alcohol, I associated that with this escapism from that, because I have
From that reality.
and since I've gotten clean, I do have a regular psychiatrist that I see, as well as a therapist, and I've been diagnosed with PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder, and depression. You know, so really all the things that I was self-medicating for from the time I was 19 until I went to rehab the day after my 32nd birthday. And, you know, really like what Mike said is that, you know, it's so rare to meet a drug addict that doesn't have mental issues and that doesn't suffer from some kind of like massive trauma.
It's hard to meet anybody who doesn't suffer from that, you know?
Exactly. I would agree with you, Mike.
But yeah, it's yeah, like you know, it's I want to reiterate too, because it's already been said, but like, it's not, being an addict is not a choice. It is not a fucking choice. Like, I don't remember when I realized, like, man, I'm really deep into this, but I remember even like towards like the last couple of years being like, man, like, I don't really see a way out of this. Like, you know, if I die, that's like better than living the way that I am. And I guess that's like the bottom line is I would just reiterate that like this isn't a choice. Of course it does start with a choice, but like nobody ever like snorts a line or smokes meth out of a pipe or takes a drink thinking that they are ever like going to have a problem. Yeah. And like once you're in it, then you're really far in it and it's hard to get out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. Mark, for you, what would be the one thing that you want people to know as a parent and as someone who has struggled with addictions as well?
That there's no one person or family that's immune from the effects of addiction. You know, you may have what you consider the perfect childhood, the perfect home life and everything like that, but addiction can still hit you no matter what. You know, it's out there. And
hidden in plain sight, you know. So, all right. Dylan, is there something that kind of speaks to you about the one thing that you would hope people understand?
I would say just to like try not to judge people so much. Like, it's obviously not their fault and there's a lot of things that contribute to it rather than what people think. Like, they'll just look at someone and then they'll be like, oh, he's an addict to something, and then judge them on it. And I just feel like it's a lot easier for the person if you're understanding and try and like be there for them rather than judge them. And I feel like it'll make their process a lot easier and healthier.
Exactly. Awesome. Thank you. And then Erica, for you, what do you think?
I think and we didn't touch on it a whole lot except talking about going to AA or NA and getting help. And I just can't stress the importance enough of, if you do think that you are an alcoholic or an addict, not just saying, I'm going to quit, and then just quitting, but not getting help. Because like we talked about, there's a reason, like there's some kind of trauma. You also have to work through the guilt and shame from the things that you did over the years of using to break free from that, because if you carry that guilt and shame around with you, you will drink or use again. And the people at AA or NA, and you'll find the ones that are for you and the ones that aren't, but no matter what, you can take something from a meeting that you can use. And if nothing else, it's that I knew that those people at the meeting, then when I would go in a family situation or Christmas or whatever and everyone was drinking, I would think about those people at the meeting and realize that they were choosing to not pick up a drink that day, and it gave me strength. So I guess there is a big difference between white knuckling your way through being sober and being genuinely happy. And I think for me, that's the biggest thing, is that I never thought that I could truly like love myself again or be happy. And I am. But without working through the shit from the past, you can't get there. So I would just say, like, reach out for help and know that you aren't alone, and that there is a life that is so much more beautiful than you can imagine. But you have to get help and do the hard work and work through it, and not think that you can do it by yourself.
Exactly. I would 1000% agree with you. And I've seen it, just, you know, some of your journey. You know, I've only known you in your sobriety, but I can see just over the last few years a definite growth through things that you have done the hard work with. And it is not easy. Each one of us here know that it is not easy. So I applaud each and every one of you.
We have come to the end of our program, and it has been a great conversation on the relational effects of substance use disorder. I thank Mark and Nathan, Mike and Michael, Erica and Dylan, Deborah and Adam for telling a piece of your story in hopes to educate people about addiction. And to those of you watching, if you or someone you know is stuck in the holds of addiction, please reach out and ask for help. There are resources available, such as the National Drug Helpline, open to any individual dealing with substance use issues, including family members and other loved ones who are struggling, and there are professionals available to help 24/7, 365. Just call 844-289-0879. Again, call anytime to 844-289-0879. There's also the crisis text line that offers advice and referrals for anyone who feels that they are experiencing a crisis, including drug and alcohol dependency, suicidal impulses, extreme family problems, and other personal difficulties. To access the crisis text line, text HOME to 741-741 anytime, day or night. Again, text HOME to 741-741. The Real Life Log is brought to you by the Live Real Foundation. You can go to our website to learn more about how we are bringing awareness and education to our communities. Please like, follow, and share all of our social media sites to help us teach and distribute to as many people as possible. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I leave you with one thought. If each of us strive to live real every day, we will change the world around us.